morning, Minister Tang. Good evening in Taiwan. We are very, very pleased to have you here and that you participate in this event. We know that you have a great relationship with our city, Barcelona, and we are very, very grateful for your availability to be here today. As you all know, Audrey Chang is a free software programmer, very well known worldwide. Since October 2016, she has been Taiwan's digital minister. Before, she held positions in software companies and worked in Silicon Valley as an entrepreneur. As a consultant, she has always promoted free and open software. She passionately believes that digital tools can be effectively used to build stronger, more open, and more accountable democracies. And I think that Taiwan, we can say it like this, Taiwan is proving that public and community action can work to ensure digital inclusion. We have the opportunity today to discuss with Audrey Tang about inclusive digital transformation and the future of our cities. Minister, let me start with a principal question. During lockdown, we have witnessed how access to internet and the skills to use it defines who wins and who loses in the digital transition. The digital divide has been exposed as a driver of social inequalities. Sometimes you have explained that in Taiwan, access to internet is a human right. The question is,
it's a human right.
Okay.
So not
which is not the same.
Broadband.
Okay, perfect. It's clear the difference. And how does your government guarantee this right?
Very carefully. So to be specific, anywhere in Taiwan, you're guaranteed, even on the top of Taiwan, almost 10, I think, well, I'm doing unit conversion, but 4,000 meters. We have 10 megabits per second at just 16 euros per month for unlimited data connection both ways. And if you don't, it's my fault, period. And so this is what we mean by broadband as a human right. For only internet access is not enough unless you can express, like through video conference, as well as you can receive. The internet is just another radio, it's just another television channel where people can download but not participate. So in Taiwan, we designed the spectrum auction, for example, for 5G this time, so that we have a lot of surplus money to fuel innovations in the under-resourced places. And this has always been the case, that we use auction design and market design to make sure that the telecoms will invest in the places where they cannot recover the cost in the next year or 5, but could actually in the next decade or 2. And also in our education curriculum, starting last year, we changed all the words about media literacy or data literacy to media competence and data competence. That is to say, the primary schoolers are now treated as producer of news, a producer of narratives, a producer of knowledge, instead of being just to contribute to, say, climate science or social justice or mask availability or fact-checking president candidates as part of their schools. And that also is important because without a pro-social way to use these skills, it could also be used in an anti-social way.
Interesting. Let's move to an issue which is affecting us currently, COVID-19. This pandemic has exposed what works, what really works, and what needs to be transformed in our cities. The pandemic has also accelerated the process of digitalization, sometimes amplifying existing inequalities in our society. As of last Friday, there have been only 578 coronavirus cases in Taiwan and just 7 deaths. 521 people have recovered. What's Taiwan's secret? And how did you break the pandemic? I mean, How do you use digital technologies to fight against COVID-19?
In Taiwan, it's been more than 200 days with no local transmissions. So that's why we have a Pride Parade. Not the Pride part, the parade part is maybe a luxury in this year. But I think the most important technology is not digital. It is entirely chemical. It's soap and also alcohol hand sanitizers. That's number one technology. Number two is the physical vaccine. That's the mask. That's number two technology. Digital only ranks the third. That we use digital to communicate important ideas, such as wear a mask to protect your own face against your own unwashed hands. Because we have a very cute spokesdog that amplifies this message very much online. So more people do that because it's simply more fun. And we also make, of course, masks fashion items. So pink and rainbow masks and things like that are all very pro-social. But the idea, very simply put, is that if science and the clarity of communication travels faster than the infodemic, which is the virus, but of the mind, then people can get into a co-creation mind, and then community action will happen. But if we cannot counter the pandemic, if we counter the pandemic with only top-down ways that encroach on fundamental freedoms and fundamental privacy concerns, then during the COVID, people may accept it and internalize it. And at the end of COVID, we will lose essential human freedom because of it. And that's a way that Taiwan deliberately does not go to. So we fought the pandemic with no lockdown and the infodemic with no takedown.
Exactly. Regarding digital technologies and COVID, it has been, as you said, this relevant discussion, and it has taken in place in Europe, but all over the world, on the role of contact tracing apps. Many people were concerned about a number of things, especially how to respect the privacy of citizens. You have mentioned the question. And I think cities like Barcelona and other organizations called on anonymity, transparency, and also control of data collected. Taiwan has put in place one of the most effective applications, contact tracing apps. What are, in your view, the ethical considerations for using contact tracing apps in times of crisis?
We do not collect any data that we were not already collecting before the pandemic. And the reason is for each new data collection method, it takes time for the civil society to see the privacy repercussions, the privacy impact. It takes time for the cryptographers and the cybersecurity experts to test its cybersecurity boundaries. And so we deliberately use only existing data collection methods, for example, the telecom cell phone strength signal. In Taiwan, when you go to Taiwan, you either go to a hotel where you're physically barred from leaving for 14 days, or you can stay at your own home with your own bathroom and then stay there for 14 days as a home quarantine. In the later case, your phone is put into the digital fence, or if you don't have a phone, we give you one for a couple of weeks. But we do not collect new data out of the phone. The data could not actually be seen by the government of any of your GPS location, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or whatever. We leave that alone. But the phone does need to be turned on. And if the phone turns on, the cell phone towers already know roughly where you are to a 50-meter radius. And we use that very coarse-grained and therefore less privacy intrusive data, not on the government level, but on the telecom level. So the telecoms, if the phone runs out of battery or if the phone goes outside of that fence, then it sends an SMS automatically, not only to you, but also to the local medical officers. And that's all it does. And then the officer will, of course, check your whereabouts. If you stay in the quarantine, then each day of the 2 weeks, we pay you 30 euros as a stipend. but if you break the quarantine, you pay us back 1,000 times that as a fine. And so because of that, it's very successful because people understand it will not read your messages, it will not interfere with WhatsApp, it works with Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on or off. And at the end of the day, when you're finished the quarantine, the telecom doesn't even have any new data they don't already have, and they will rotate the log and delete the data.
You are sharing with us really something useful and important we can all learn from. Another issue we want to tackle, which we know you are passionate about, is civic participation. You are a fervent believer in open data, open governance, civil society, government collaboration, and strong civic participation. But we are now living in turbulent times with new authoritarian movements worldwide. In many countries, disinformation, biases in the use of artificial intelligence, and security and privacy concerns are rising. So how do you encourage civic participation in times of growing political disaffection? And more, how do you ensure that this participation is inclusive?
With cute dogs, always very important. So this is the spokesdog of the Central Epidemic Command Center that shows you how not to touch your face for wearing a mask. For the physical distance, it shows that when you're outdoor, please keep 2 Shiba Inus away, and indoor 3 Shiba Inus away from one another, and so on and so forth. So we do all our public communications using the cute dog and cute cats and other cute pictures, memes in other words. And this is called humor over rumor. And this is really the Taiwan playbook, how we countered the infodemic with no takedown. Because once we start taking down things, the government become more authoritarian. Even if you have a good justification like hate speech and so on, at the end of the day, that means that people trust each other less and the government trusts the people less. But if you can counter this rampant disinformation, which travels on the outrage and the channeling of outrage into revenge or discrimination, if we can use humor to make sure that it's culture jammed, that is to say, every time there is a trending toxic disinformation, instead of taking it down, we just culture jam it from the ministry, hiring professional comedians in a couple hours. Then by the same news cycle, joy travels faster than outrage, and people laugh about it, and then they laugh the tension off, and then can actually start to deliberate on civic participation. So I would always say that the timely response is the most important, and the most useful response to the toxicity and polarization is just a good old-fashioned internet meme.
Perfect. Let's quickly move to the last question I want to make, because we would like to know more about the relationships between government and civic platforms in your country. In Taiwan, several contributors partner with the government to create civic engagement platforms. So how do you channel the initiatives that arise from these platforms to build consensus on how the government should approach controversial topics?
Yeah. First of all, anything that enables primary schoolers to be newscasters is social media. But some of them are antisocial and some of them are pro-social. So we only give the binding agenda setting power to the pro-social part of social media, and it's based on free and open software. For example, one of the leading AI-powered conversation is called Polis, and we actually have a polis.gov.tw now, but it started as a free software project from Seattle. And by AI here, I mean assistive intelligence, something that is aligned to your values, something that's accountable instead of being authoritarian and surveillance intelligence. So this assistive intelligence, we first introduced in 2015 to talk about the UberX case. And you can see my friends and families, they're all having very different feelings about this, but then still we're friends and families. So the important part is that in our user interface, in the citizens initiative interface on Polis, you can see one sentiment from me that I think passenger liability insurance very important. If you agree, you move toward me a little bit. Your avatar here will be moving literally toward me here. And then if you disagree, then you will move farther away from me here. But there is no reply button, because if there is a reply button, people tend to make personal attacks. People stop resonating with one another's feelings. But with no reply button, at the end of each conversation, we identify maybe 5 ideological points, like what's sharing economy. But actually, for most of the practical issues, people agree with most of their neighbors on most of the things most of the time. This was not just a mirage. This is something that's actually true, but it's just not newsworthy, right? Because it's newsworthy if there is a controversy. It's less newsworthy if everybody can broadly agree that registration, that fair insurance, that the taxi meter should not be undercut, but it could be improved on. All these are like bland. But once we show that there is a real consensus, then we get all the stakeholders on the same table, live stream the conference, holding them to account on the crowdsourced agenda, and then pass the multi-purpose taxi, which Uber is now just riding as a legal fleet and working only with professional taxi drivers. But then we also adopted like surge pricing and other innovations that Uber had in other multi-purpose taxis as well. So it's a win-win-win situation that is engendered by the anti-social media, and we restore it with pro-social media.
It's really great that you share your experience with about this issue and how you work in civic participation. I think it's something very important for us, and we can learn from it. While the questions of the audience are arriving, let me ask you about an issue we are very interested in, which is digital gender gap. How you can get over the gender gap in Taiwan to promote women's inclusion in STEAM.
This is important, and I think we have an advantage in translating programming, not as software engineering, but as program design. It's actually the same thing, but because we intentionally say it's a design thing, it means that digital or design, it connects people to people. It's people skill. Whereas if we call it engineering or IT, that sounds like a machinery job. And so in Taiwan, engineering is more gender stereotyped, but design, well, being a transgender is a good thing in design because you can empathize with everyone, right? And so design is more diverse, more inclusive, and more transcultural as well. And so I think intentionally using design language to describe STEAM. I have seen people that says design should be added to STEAM, like STEAM D. But to me, I think design should lead the STEAM narrative.
True, that's true. It's a good point. And regarding coronavirus, we would like to know what exactly the so-called participatory self-surveillance approach means for preventing contagions.
Sure. On early April, there was a case where there's a person who worked as a professional in the intimate drinking bar in the nightlife district gets confirmed with COVID. On the first day, the worker did not disclose her profession. Only on the second day did she say, okay, I work in that intimate drinking bar. And for a good reason, because of her profession, she did not want to reveal the identity of the patrons, of the customers. And at that time, on the more antisocial side of social media, there's a lot of stigma, a lot of hunting, right? A lot of people saying that we should shut down those businesses. We should put people in jail if they refuse to collaborate and things like that. But our CECC did nothing of that sort because our Central Epidemic Command Center already contains experts that have extensive experience working with HIV plus communities. They know exactly how important privacy is for those communities. So instead of state surveillance, they agreed on a self-surveillance pact called the real contact system. And the upshot is that as long as if there is an outbreak in any of those businesses, they can contact the people who frequented it a few weeks ago to now, then they don't need to submit any data to the government. And so they innovated. From early April to late April, they start innovating using single-use emails, prepaid SIM cards, pseudonyms on the scratch pad that's literally shredded at the end of the 4 weeks period, and also a hat with plastic shielding that allows people to drink beneath it, but perhaps no kissing, and so on. And so with those social innovations, actually by May, the municipalities all started to allow the people who operated under those procedures to still continue business as usual in the nightlife district. And that's participatory self-surveillance because there's no data that's sent to the state. And when even the nightlife district can join the counter-epidemic team, it makes the trust stronger. Otherwise, the stigma will drive people underground and polarize the society.
Here we have some questions from the audience. Anna is asking regarding civic participation. What is the approach to be taken by political and social action not to leave anybody behind in the current scenario?
I think in terms of civic participation, an important idea is reverse procurement. In Taiwan, we have a very fast iteration cycle so that if anyone who sees a government digital service is not doing the job that it should do, they can prototype something very quickly. If you search for G0V or Gov0, you can see this entire movement that just looks at all the government digital service that's all something that gov.tw and change a O to a 0, and then you get into the shadow government that's more interactive, open source, and fun. And so this kind of forking the government, important pronunciation, fork the government, takes what's already there for digital service, but then deliver it in a way that's truly co-creational. And the greatness of the innovation from the social sector, from the civic technologist, then prompts the media, that prompts the state to then merge those forks into our digital service. So when, for example, how we in Tainan City built a map that show availability of masks in nearby convenience stores, we immediately reverse procure it, meaning that they designed the spec. We only provide a real-time API every 30 seconds and also talk to Google to waive his bill. But in any case, we work then later with the OpenStreetMap community and so on. So there's more than 140 different applications all showing the same API for people to get easy access to the pharmacies. And when people queue after me, for example, they can see me swipe my national health card and see the real-time stock reduced by 2 or 3 or 9, depending on the date, and see the system in action. If they see any unfairness, they would just call the hotline 1922, and then we would just correct it the very next day. And so this rapid iteration, I think, is the most important thing in reverse procurement and in civic participation.
It's true. Mark says that having into account the rise of disinformation, the biases in the use of artificial intelligence, and the security and privacy concerns we have talked about, do you think that Internet failed to deliver on its early promises?
Well, Internet's early promises is that when people are isolated in bunkers, they should still be able to hold conferences. And they have, I think, proven that Internet was truly built for this. We are having a conference, even though we may be isolated from our friends and family. I still have friends in quarantine, but we can feel that we are in the same room. And aside from that, I think it's not about fulfilling. It's about externalities. It turns out that certain applications on the internet is addictive. Turns out something in it are authoritarian. something in it are actually surveillance capitalism. And so these are the negative externalities, but I wouldn't say the internet failed in its original spec.
And Elena is asking about your feelings. And she asks, are you optimistic about the immediate future? Digital transformation will help us to build a better future.
Definitely. I think without the digital, you can imagine how bad COVID would be with no digital technologies. No coordination would be possible. And indeed, in 2003, we had a taste of that in SARS 1.0 in Taiwan. We had to lock down an entire hospital unannounced. The municipal and the central government was saying completely different things. It was very chaotic. And that is how it worked before mobile web, before the digitalization of the healthcare system. At the Taiwan National Health Insurance, back in 2003, only the small island of Pescador of Penghu had a IC card. Everybody else still used paper-based national health insurance cards, and which made rationing masks basically impossible. And so certainly digitalization has saved more people as compared to SARS 1.0. But of course, SARS 3.0 may appear, I don't know, next year, next decade. So we need to prepare ourselves to it. But still, I am optimistic.
That's great to hear. I'm very sorry, but we don't have time for more questions. But thank you. Thank you very much for your contributions. And let me say that we are very, very grateful, Minister, for your time and for your dedication. And hopefully we'll meet up in the near future here in Barcelona. And it has been a great pleasure having you in our smart city and in the opening of our smart city in Barcelona.
Yeah, I was in Barcelona actually in the time for the Mobile World Capital as part of Digital Future Society. So I look forward to visit again because that was immediately before the pandemic. So it would be nice to visit immediately after the pandemic as well. But till then, live long and prosper.
We tried next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.